Good morning, everybody. I'm Gabe Zichermann, and I want to start off by introducing you, since we've been talking about so many extraordinary young kids, I want to introduce you to a perfectly ordinary young boy. His name is Griffin Sanders, and he's a 10-year-old kid. And last summer, Griffin, like so many other perfectly normal 10-year-old kids, went out for a drive with his 74-year-old great-grandmother and 4-year-old brother in the suburbs of Denver. And they were on the freeway, on the highway, they were out. He was super excited about, maybe going to get an ice cream or buying a new toy. And as their car got up to about 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, Griffin's great-grandmother had a heart attack and passed out behind the wheel. And after quickly trying to revive his great-grandmother, as their vehicle slowly slid into oncoming traffic, Griffin did what, of course, any perfectly normal 10-year-old kid would do. He grabbed control of the car and safely executed a maneuver where he put the car through oncoming traffic into the side of the road, saving the lives of his great-grandmother, his 4-year-old brother, and all the other drivers on the road. And the police turned to Griffin, this perfectly normal 10-year-old kid, and said, "How did you do this?" And he said, "Mario Kart," was the answer. And he thought it was actually like a test from inside the game. And this is amazing, right? We're looking at this unbelievable kind of new creativity, this new innovative view of the world. If we took a step back and went back to sort of the beginning of civilization and we asked, what is creativity? Our view of creativity was always sort of grounded in this idea that people who were creative were highly intelligent and probably quite privileged, right? They had access to things that other people didn't. And as time moved on, we started to see the creative person as also being a little bit crazy, and measuring the quality of their creativity not only by the things that they produced, but also by the quantity of things that they produced. So a sort of prolific nature was meaningful and important. As we entered the Industrial Revolution, we also started to see the creative person as having a unique methodology, and I think this meshes well with the idea of industrialization, that it wasn't just the output, but the process that makes a creative person interesting. And towards the latter half of that time period, we also started to do things like count the economic value of the creativity that people produced. The more that it was worth, the more creative and more interesting the person would be. And that also being good at creativity and innovation meant beating other people. But I would posit that we've entered a new era of creativity and innovation. We've turned some corner. We're in a new period of time. And in this new period of time, let's be honest, all the easy problems have been solved. If we are to take society from where it is now to where it needs to go, to be creative and innovative, we've got to think about creativity through a different prism. It needs to be social. It needs to be something that amplifies each one of us individually. But it also needs to be democratic, because the next great ideas won't just come from the privileged few, from the crazy, from the people with methodology. They will come from each and every one of us and collectively transform the world that we live in. This is also combined with an idea called fluid intelligence, which is the thing that Griffin was demonstrating. It's our ability to come up with new ideas on the fly, to think our way out of problems, to be innovative in the moment. These two things, these ideas put together, I think, are largely being expressed powerfully through the concept of games. And it's not just games like Minecraft that 40 million kids or so are playing. I'm sure some of you or some of your children actually play. But it's the broader context, because it's not just what they're playing, it's also how much they're playing and what that play does to their brains. So one of the reasons why games are so powerful, why they have such an effect on us, is a concept called intrinsic reinforcement. And here's how it works. Anytime you challenge yourself to something, anything at all, it doesn't matter how big or how small, and then you achieve that thing, your brain secretes a magical little bit of dopamine, which is a pleasurable chemical. It feels really good, right? So challenge achievement, that feels good. Now, it turns out that a researcher, a neuropsychologist named Ian Robertson, has also coined this concept called the winner effect. So the more you do this challenge achievement pleasure loop, the more dopamine and testosterone is secreted in your brain, the more you want to do it. So the more you succeed, the more you want to succeed. And that dopamine testosterone changes the way our brains are actually structured. So people who go through these gaming experiences doing this challenge achievement loop over and over again want to do that more and more. But it's also a design principle of game concepts that enables them to be so transformative. It's what I like to call the 3 Fs: feedback, friends, and fun. a system that has that powerful winner effect but also has feedback, friends, and fun is one that's going to be quite compelling. So I feel like we've entered this new era, as I mentioned to you, which I think is actually pretty revolutionary. It's not just the kinds of creative ideas that we're creating, it's the quantity of creative ideas. It's the quality of those creative ideas. And it's the number of people who get to be creative and whose voices in that prism of creativity get amplified. If we want to do that deliberately, if we want to take advantage of the power of games, some of my contemporaries suggest that that will just naturally evolve from people playing Mario Kart. And I think that's the exception rather than the rule. I think what we need to do is collectively decide to actively make that happen, to put the power of games to work, to inspire creativity and innovation. And that concept is called gamification. It's when we take deliberately the ideas of games and apply them to changing people's behavior and making the world a more interesting, more dynamic, and more creative place. Now, there's some great examples of this happening. For example, the game Eterna. So in the game Eterna, hundreds of thousands of people play this game. It's kind of amazing. It's all about people discovering new structures in RNA, which is a core building block of the world, right? A core protein in the world. Individual people, average people, have discovered literally thousands of new RNA structures that science has never discovered. So scientists have never been able to find these, and players in the game RNA have completely new biomechanical structures from playing this game. Or Philo, which is a game from my home country, from Canada, that players can play. And it's a game in which you uncover the structure of DNA, so you're looking at the core components of DNA. Players of Philo have discovered approximately 350,000 potential mistakes in our understanding of the structure of DNA. So these are potential mistakes that scientists have made about how DNA works and what it is and what's on every aspect of DNA, and players have discovered this. But it's not just the realm of science, it's also in the realm of commerce and consumerism. Companies like Quirky, which some of you might know, are using game concepts to radically transform the way that they do innovation, that they do new product development. This is a consumer products company. And interestingly, Quirky uses these ideas not just to solicit new concepts from the crowd, but they use gamification to vet those concepts, help with the design, figure out the pricing, determine the market strategy. There's a lot going on. It's an entire system and process. And it's enabling the company to do something that no consumer products organization has ever been able to do. Quirky is on target to launch 2 new consumer products a month as an organization. Imagine 2 new consumer products a month being launched by any of our major organizations. This is a sea change in creativity and innovation, and it's gamification that leads the way. Now, what are some of the structural things that enable gamification to accomplish this sort of miracle with creativity? And one of them is something that Quirky understands really well, and that's the idea of constraint. So this is really important. It turns out that constraint is very important for driving creativity. In the past, we thought that it was something like, you not having any money, you needing to be creative to survive, but there's other elements of constraint that enable that. Think about this. Everyone in the developed world has in their pocket a device, like this one, that's capable of recording a high-definition film, editing it, putting a score on it, and uploading it to the internet. And every year, to YouTube, people upload the equivalent of 8 million full-length feature films worth of content to YouTube every year. So now tell me, shouldn't the statistics have proven that already on YouTube we should have had a Raging Bull or The Other Dream Team, some kind of amazing movie that would have come out of the YouTube era? We've got lots of great content on YouTube, but we haven't managed to produce things of that quality from this context. And it's because it's not just about access to the tools in order to drive creativity, it's got to have some amount of constraint. And that's something that IBM understands very well in its design for its gamified system called City One. This is basically a sim city for people who run cities. So if you're actually involved in the management of a city, you can go on IBM's website and play this game. It's SimCity for you, called City One. And already today, tens of millions of people around the world have benefited from the lessons that city managers have learned by playing City One. Change the variables in the city, see what happens, figure out, can we do more trash delivery? Do we need more water supply? Fascinating, right? Now, one of the things that City One highlights critically about the nature of gamification, its ability to drive creativity, is the idea of easy failure, enabling people to fail easily. Because after all, in a game-like context, how does failure work, right? Your character dies, you get run over by something, you fall off a cliff, you click a button, you start again. No penalty, right? We just get to fail and keep doing it over and over and over again. And learning through failure is very powerful. But consider, is our education system, are our jobs structured in such a way to enable this learning from failure? We all say that learning from failure is great, but schools and workplaces are pretty high pressure. Do you know the answer to that question? Oh, that was wrong. That's terrible. Everybody notices the mistake that you made. No matter how coddled you think our children are, the reality is they still live in a fairly high-pressure environment of testing and questioning them in public. We don't make failure as easy as it needs to be, whereas in the gamified environment, we do. Now, why we care about that, the third leg of how gamification drives innovation, is the concept of perseverance, or grit. Perseverance is our ability to push through difficult obstacles when we want to accomplish something, to get through the crap, so to speak, to get to the amazing other side. And perseverance is the #1 predictor of success for somebody's creative endeavors and their career. And if you put it together with something like great fluid intelligence, you have the sort of magical combination that we need to be able to get through and solve some of the world's biggest problems. Now, gamification enables us to drive perseverance. That failure loop I talked about, it teaches you, the player, that failure is okay and you need to keep pushing through. When your character dies, when you can't pass this level, when you can't accomplish something, you just keep going. You start again, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and we drive that over and over. Now, it wasn't always this way in the game space. Back when games took quarters, games like Donkey Kong, for example, were designed to fail you on the first level. They were really hard, because the designers wanted you to put as many quarters as possible into the machine. Now that the economics of gamification are about keeping you in the game for as long as possible, the equation's totally changed. And it's teaching people how to persevere and how to push through. But sometimes pure perseverance isn't enough. We need kids to learn new skills and new talents. And some things, especially more difficult challenges, require people to learn tools which sometimes can be kind of complicated or difficult. And so one company that sort of understands this, that sees this idea, is a company called Autodesk. They make 3D modeling software. And every time a 3D movie comes out, millions of people go to Autodesk's website and think, oh, I want to do 3D modeling, I love that movie, and they download this software from Autodesk. And then what they find out is that 3D modeling is actually really hard. Like, it's not easy to do, and that's why we don't all do 3D modeling for a living. So Autodesk, recognizing that this was the case, realized that they had to get into the business of teaching people how to use the tool. So they put a gamification structure around their application. So when you download it, you are a secret agent on a mission. It's a lot like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, if you guys remember that game. That was one of my favorites. You travel around the world solving these problems. You're given a puzzle, you're given some clues, and in order to unlock each clue as you travel around the world, you have to learn a basic element of 3D modeling, like make the object. Cool. Rotate the object, light the object, set it on fire, bounce it around. And in the end, you look up and you go, oh my God, I learned how to be a 3D modeler through the prism of games. Now, let me give you some stats just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Through this gamification framework, Autodesk increased the amount of time that people use their 3D modeling software by 40%, 40, and increased the total sales of their software by 17% as a result of this. Imagine if we could get kids to do 40% more STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. Imagine if we could get them 17% more people to choose careers in that field. How amazing that would be. And that's part of helping people find what they're good at that gamification facilitates. And the last element that drives creativity in gamification is about speed and pressure. It turns out that actually putting some pressure on people can help them make better decisions and feel better about themselves. Perrin and Jacobs, for example, doing this famous research that fast decisions make people feel happier. And we now have a bunch of research, a body of evidence, that suggests that certain kinds of decisions are actually better made when they're made quickly. And a whole thread of gamification examples, like Blitz and like game storming, that use the power of speed and pressure to get people to make more decisions and to make them more quickly. And through the power of the crowd, vet those decisions and find the best ones. Now, many of the examples that I've given you sound awesome if we're dealing with, 10-year-old kids and like a new concept. And what about in the real world, Gabe? What about the real world use of gamification and innovation? And so I'll give you the most extreme example that I can of how this can work in the real world. the Department of Work and Pensions in the United Kingdom. It is the governmental department responsible for unemployment insurance and retraining people. It alone accounts for 30% of the UK's total overall governmental spending, this one department of the government. It's got hundreds of thousands of employees. It reaches all parts of the UK. It is a very entrenched bureaucracy. It is not known for being innovative. That is not its middle name. But they decided that they wanted to activate the innovation power of the community of people who work at the DWP, and so they launched a pretty cool idea called Idea Street. And the concept of Idea Street is pretty simple. Anyone in the company can propose a new concept for the DWP to do, and that concept becomes a stock in a virtual stock market. So your ideas get bought and sold by your coworkers and your colleagues and your peers using virtual currency. And the best results quickly bubble to the top. They're the ones that are most valuable in the stock market. And then the company comes through, the organization comes through and redeems them by buying them off the market. In the first 90 days, the DWP generated 1,500 new ideas and a potential for £90 million worth of savings in the organization just by using that gamified example. So I'd posit fundamentally that we've entered into this new era, that gamification, when applied correctly, can help us drive untold creativity, a new kind of creativity, one that's pretty different from the creativity we thought of before, but adds all of those ideas together, that's about education, that's about access, that's about being prolific, it's about new methodology, and it's also about being commercially successful, that all of those things kind of put together are embodied in this new sort of creativity. And that with the social layer, with the elements of connectedness that gamification allows, and some of the different frameworks that we talked about today, the 3 Fs, feedback, friends, and fun, the winner's effect, that kind of dopamine loop, and also things like constraint, like the ability to fail, like speed and pressure, like perseverance. These things together portend an entirely new opportunity for creativity, a change in the way that we think, and potentially the best hope for our future. Imagine if we took our kids back to the medieval era. Imagine if you could take any of today's kids, 10-year-olds like Griffin, for example, back to the medieval era. What would our ancestors have thought of them? They would seem like magical geniuses, right? Appearing from the future, capable of manipulating technology, understanding things in the world that people in that era never would have understood. We often like to make fun of kids today and say they're kind of dumb, right? To diminish them because they're so technologically connected, because they play so many games, because they have a different kind of socializing from the way that we grew up, because we see them as not being able to focus or have attention. But in fact, I'd posit, maybe they are geniuses. Maybe this is the new creativity. And if the power of gamification allows us to unleash their collective ability, we'll all win. Thank you.